Hello, I'm back with Blue Review, and I'm going to do as promised a few days ago and take a closer look at two films from 1971, the new Hollywood era. Kind of both would fall under an odd kind of term I encountered on the internet called experimental drama. Um, and I think they both definitely qualify. They're definitely uh, the way they're made, the way they're shot, cut, uh, things, choices that are made creatively, and are a little off kilter, a little bit more like European cinema of that time, and um, also kind of part of the loosening of restrictions that came with the late 60s and early 70s as far as darker subject matter and nudity and language and just everything. So these are very much adult films. These aren't the terms of endearment or Little Miss Daisies. Driving Miss Daisies. They're not Little Miss Daisies either. This is real, concrete stuff that mainly challenges your emotion, but really uses a lot of film technique to do it. So it's nice when you can have that both in one film. So without going on and on the introduction, the first one I'm going to talk to. Hi, film. The first one I'm going to talk about is Puzzle of a Downfall Child. This is with Faye Dunaway by Jerry Schatzberg. And I went over a lot of this last video, so I won't repeat myself too much if I can help it. Basically, she's based on it's kind of biographical. Jerry Schatzberg was a photographer turned film director. This was his first feature film, and he had a kind of a relationship, working and maybe more than working relationship with a model. And so in the movie, his surrogate character is played by Barry Primus, and this character is named Aaron Reinhardt, and the model analog character is Lou Andreas Sand, and that's played by Faye Dunaway. So what the structure, the wraparound of the movie is that which we cut back and forth to all through the movie, sometimes very abruptly, very suddenly. I really like the structure and the editing choices. The structure is that Einhardt is, did I get his name right? Reinhardt. So Reinhardt is he's basically interviewing Lou about her career and her personal life. And it's going to use the memoirs to piece together a movie biography. So a little meta here. The Aaron Reinhardt that's in the framing wraparound is a bit closer to how Jerry Schatzberg probably looked at the time he made the movie. Very kind of thicker, longer, curly hair and glasses, and kind of a little more bohemian. And it was 1970 in Hollywood or wherever the rich congregate. Yes, rich artists. And what we find out in flashbacks, is her past. It's very fragmented. It's non-linear. The movie structure would be very at home today with the kind of films that have come out in the decades since. We get kind of an idea of why she's got a lot of issues about her sexuality and relationships, and kind of a neediness. She's very insecure. She's got a lot of mental illness. And her mind is literally going a million places at once. I'm not going to diagnose her by today's terms. They don't really diagnose her too much specifically in this movie by yesterday's terms, but she does have a crash. Excuse me. And I woke up my cat, and end up in the mental hospital for a time. Not all of this is super delineated in order, and like I said, the events are shuffled around. What we learn in the flashbacks is that Aaron and her had a relationship on and off over the years, And the Aaron of the early to, well, I guess late 1950s to late 1960s Aaron, it has like short, really kind of square, ugly haircut and clean shaven, and he's kind of dorky, and but she's really attached to him, and she's in love with him, but she's drawn to this guy named Mark, who's kind of a misogynist pig, played by Roy Scheider, one of his early film roles. And, and she alludes to other relationships, and, she tries to have sex with her therapist, who declines after she mentions she's had sex with one of her therapists before. She's really, once she gets in that level of fame and power, uh, she's kind of able to be beyond help. Like, in other words, she kind of can live this existence and keep moving because she has a buffer of this kind of success, but she's very on the precipice all the time, mental health wise. I really liked this movie. I think Faye Dunaway is my favorite performance by her, I've decided. I guess Network would be a close second. This movie is hardly ever talked about. It wasn't screened for 40 years until a 2011 retrospective with her. I forgot what it was, a famous cinema venue, probably in New York or Los Angeles. I have friends who could probably correct me on this kind of stuff, like Bill White. Bill White, ladies and gentlemen, Bill White, or Mick Cantone. Mick Cantone, ladies and gentlemen, Mick Cantone. I just somehow feel like two of them would know right immediately, because I'm too slack to look it up again. So interest in it increased to the point where it's finally coming out on home video. I mean, both of the Blu-rays I'm reviewing are brand new. There was Fox Lorber, and they are both original Universal Studios films that Fox Lorber has acquired and put in their Kino Lorber Studio Classic series. I went all over this in the last video. But, just a refresher in case you haven't watched the last video. You should probably go watch that video, just, it's a good video. But this one will probably be better because I'm actually going to try to give you some insight into the movie, what little insight I have, instead of just statistics and things. So I think Faye Dunaway also renewed her interest in it during the 2011 screening. That's what I thought I intimated. So finally, several years later, we get this home video release. Both of these are new as of December 2020, and both are ones that I've really wanted in my library, and I had no idea when or if they were going to come on Blu-ray. I saw both of them on YouTube a few years ago, and had never heard of either one of them. Now, I mean, a lot of people heard of Diary of a Mad Housewife, the one I'm going to talk about next, but I had never heard anybody mention Puzzle of a Downfall Child. I mean, much less, it stars Faye Dunaway. And it's Schatzberg's first movie, and I love several of his films. Panic in Needle Park, Scarecrow are two great ones. I have Scarecrow on Blu-ray through Warner Brothers. And of course, he's most famous now, and enduringly famous for Mommy Dearest, also with Faye Dunaway, which is, of course, has inadvertently become a camp classic. Dunaway herself kind of disowned the film and refused to make any interviews because she thought she was really tapping into Joan Crawford and doing an earnest job, and it was being interpreted as camp, and also it was interpreted as she really was that kind of person. That she did the role so well that people thought Faye Dunaway was a monster as she depicted Joan Crawford. Oddly, she didn't perceive Joan Crawford to be a monster, just a flawed and a strong but very flawed person, and of course abusive. Anyway, back to Puzzle. So there's some powerful filmmaking going on when she's in the mental hospital. There's a lot of kind of avant-garde shots, quick cuts, and it's a very European kind of flavored film. I mean, this is around the couple of years after John Boorman did Point Blank, which technique-wise was really a leap forward for Hollywood, and of course was very influenced by European cinema. European and Japanese cinema were much more experimental than Hollywood cinema in the early to mid 60s. And these kind of techniques, I don't know, via film school or just film fanatics or film critics or, like the French New Wave guys started as film critics. And they also in turn influenced Hollywood. Uh, it was a great time as far as cross fertilization of ideas and styles. Um, but this is definitely really cool. I mean, it's less conventional than Schatzberg's later movies, much less conventional, which might be why it's not on anyone's lips really anymore, but it should be rediscovered. So, the second one I'm going to talk about, this one was painful to get through, not because it isn't a brilliant movie, but because it is a brilliant movie. I had only seen it once before, Diary of a Mad Housewife, directed by Frank Perry. I have reviewed one of Frank Perry's kind of cult classic films, The Swimmer from 1968 with Kirk Douglas. I'm sorry, not Kirk Douglas. The guy he's in a ton of movies with, Burt Lancaster. Whoops. Burt Lancaster, ladies and gentlemen, Burt Lancaster was in The Swimmer. I enjoyed it a lot. And it has a very quirky, off-kilter vibe to it. Like sometimes some of the deliveries of the lines are like, is this supposed to be serious or phony? I mean, it's the kind of thing you would see in a lot of David Lynch's later work, kind of like absurdist deliveries and weird reactions to the deliveries. And I felt like it had to be his style of directing because certainly I'd never seen Burt Lancaster act that way in any other film. But this isn't about The Swimmer. It's about his film from 2 years later, Diary of a Mad Housewife. Okay, so it stars Carrie Snodgrass, who never really got a huge amount of recognition as an actress, unfortunately. She stopped acting very much, except a few sporadic appearances from the late 80s on. I think she was in like The Fury by Brian De Palma, and I don't know. I mean, I used to hear her name growing up. My mom liked her or knew her from movies, but I can't remember which movies my mom liked her from. My mom might have liked this movie, but this one would have been one my parents would have had to show in the theater because it's definitely an R movie. It's not something that I would have seen on TV unless it was heavily cut. I mean, I did see Looking for Mr. Goodbar, not Dr. Goodbar, Looking for Mr. Goodbar on television, and I was tripped out by it. I was about 10 or 12. I had sneaked and read my mom's novel, which is extremely sexually graphic and very morose. I liked the movie, though. It had a heavy effect on me, but I didn't realize just how cut it was. It was pretty skillfully edited down. I finally saw the unedited version a number of years later, and wow, okay. That's one that should be in this series. Looking for Mr. Goodbar. They need to jump the fuck on that one. Because that's been a prized kind of bootleg and MIA on digital home video, home media. Never had an official DVD release of any kind, much less a Blu-ray. So, Diary of a Mad Housewife, Carrie Snodgrass. She plays kind of a forlorn and I could say abused, but today's definition of abused, by today's definition, she's definitely abused. It is wince-inducing at watching it. She's not like being punched or anything or raped, but she is being psychologically browbeaten, manipulated, and constantly hurt and tormented by her husband, played by Richard Benjamin, to the point where it's that kind of style. Like some of the things he says to her, even in the very first few minutes of the movie, are just like, when's somebody gonna laugh? I mean, is he joking? Because they're so absurd, so ridiculous, so over the top. And his character's like that through the entire movie. He's so wound up and anal retentive and phony and unappreciative and trying to live this kind of weird life beyond his financial or intellectual means, and just dragging his wife along. Tina's her name. He's just dragging Tina along like she's a puppet, and his name's Jonathan. And Jonathan is trying to hobnob with the celebrities and get his creative juices flowing. I mean, he's ponderously pretentious. He's extremely rude. He has like no social skills like whatsoever. He believes he's got to be the loudest guy in the room all the time. He corrects everyone's behavior all the time. Several characters want to beat him up, and I really kind of wish one had, but unfortunately not. Sorry, that's a spoiler because you'll probably be wanting that to happen too when you watch it. One critic at the time the movie came out said he was one of the most repellent. I don't know if he said repellent. One of the greatest monsters in the history of cinema, and he is. He's a human monster, but he's very much a monster. And every time you feel like they're trying to wind up a little sympathy for him and humanize him a little, and of course she's receptive to this, or she gets to the point where she's not fooled by it anymore, and she's actually downright cynical about it. She's actually pretty deadpan and cynical towards a lot of his antics, but she's kind of stuck in this marriage for the moment because of the financial situation and they're raising two young daughters. But they're living way beyond their means. And she finally, begins, giving him back, as good as she gets. But a lot of it goes over his head. He's not, he believes he's this throbbing, towering intellectual, but he's really not that bright. A lot of things just completely sail over his head because he's always, in his own head doing his own little agenda of how this should be and that should be, and he's going to be a star and he's going to be rich and famous. He's a lawyer in the movie. Meanwhile, he's just taking all these ridiculous chances, throwing all their money away, pretending to be richer than they really are. It's painful to watch. That brings me to our third major character, played by Frank Langella, and he's a totally nihilistic author, famous author, very nihilistic, extremely misogynistic, calls women broads constantly. This is 1970. I mean, I'm thinking it's like a film noir or something, but he's like, yeah, that broad. He's like he's just in it for the sex. He's very defensive and offensive about any subject of intimacy or relationships. So sure enough, our poor beleaguered heroine Tina starts having an affair with him. After thinking he's thinking correctly that he's a total bore and an asshole, and telling him so when they first meet at a party. At first you think, oh, he's cynical and this is his way with women, and she's can handle herself, but she's so browbeaten at home by the dick husband that when she's with this guy, she actually is seeking some, comfort. And man, he's the wrong guy to ask for it. And pretty soon, this kind of sex only affair, as she becomes slowly more dependent on him, albeit still skeptical, and tells him periodically. He blows it off, not like her husband though. He blows it in kind of the suave, cynical way. But then, when she really puts it down to the line and calls him out for what he is, he explodes, and man, he is vicious as fuck to her. Definitely abusive. He's the more overtly abusive, not so much not psychological. He's like the verbal, borderline physically abusive. Like he thinks that the abuse turns her on, and the roughness, and it does sexually excite her to an extent, especially after having been with the boring guy who is occasionally meekly asking for sex. And she's, exhausted from basically running his life for him because he's so inept. By the end of the movie, I'm practically weeping for this woman. She's an indelible character, and there's no easy answers at the end. She goes and tries to get help. I mean, well, her husband fucks her over one last time, right? When you really think he's about to be redeemed, he lays a bunch of bombs on her, and it's like, geez, he really is as bad, actually worse than you've been thinking he was all the time. While part of her has been blaming herself and feeling guilty about having the affair with Dracula. I mean, Frank Langella, same thing. And by that time, she's numb and jaded, and so am I. I mean, the viewer is numb and jaded, and she tries to go into group therapy, and those people begin belittling her and questioning her moral choices. It's really the kind of thing probably several generations of women in America have gone through, maybe all over the world. I don't know. In modern times is what I mean. They're like the 20th century, post-war, the boomer generation, which I guess these people are technically, um, and onward. It's like that generation. You had an awakening. Like these two people met, Jonathan and Tina met at a rally, like a protest rally in the early '60s for civil rights, and they were both idealistic. This is the way he recounts it, and she agrees with her. And it's funny, he's wistful about this, and yet he makes no effort to try to reclaim any of those values. He's like it's gone. I don't know where it went. I just and you feel it's like the early boomer sellout to yuppieism. It's like uh, there's probably the most memorable scene to people who are only casually interested in this movie nowadays would be a concert that they attend at someone's rich person's pad, and the band playing is the original Alice Cooper band. Now this is like 1970, so I think this is right before Love It to Death came out, which I think is the first album of theirs to chart. It was their third LP, and they'd been together since 1964. And of course, Vincent Furnier took the name Alice Cooper, but Alice Cooper was the name of the band. And in this movie, they're actually billed as the Alice Cooper Band. So that's better than people getting confused that Alice Cooper, the band, is really a guy when it really was a band. As a matter of fact, Vincent Furnier wrote a very, very, very tiny amount of the songs on the several Alice Cooper band albums. It wasn't until he went solo that he had to start working on lyrics full time, and of course he got help from Bob Ezrin and such. But anyway, that could be a music thing. But they're in this movie. I don't recognize the song they're performing, so therefore it probably must be something off Pretty's for You, which I think is their second album. It was on Frank Zappa's label, Straight. I was just talking to my friend Tim McLean. Tim McLean, ladies and gentlemen. Tim McLean, my longtime buddy, and we were just talking about all this the other day, the Alice Cooper stuff. So he's like, Jonathan is like, he's really nerdy, but he's like jamming along to the music and like, ooh, this hip rock music. And it's like, oh my God, it's so embarrassing. And there's a lot of like hippies at the party and artists and some rich people. And that's where Tina meets the boorish Langella. And it's just so weird. I mean, he's so clueless. He just wants to be seen, and he wants to be seen with certain people. Oh, it's just horrible. So what's the answer for our mad housewife? Well, it seems like she's getting away from being a housewife at the end, finally putting that life away, but trying to get therapy. And she's finding that people are judgmental everywhere, and people will get in your face and get in your business and judge you for your decisions because they have these strict, outmoded, stratified views of marriage and sexuality and loyalty, fidelity, all this kind of stuff. And if you don't behave a certain way, you're this horribly immoral person. Or if you don't behave immorally, you're this, weak, timid person who's not hip. You can't win. So the fade out on her face, the shot, when all the credits roll, it's on camera, one take. They're all the credits. We just see very, very slight nuances in her expression. It's powerful. I would say the only movie that I can think of that looks right into a woman's face as the credits begin to roll, and you feel that raw thing in their eyes is the end of Magnolia, the final shot with Melora Walters, and which is probably my top 5 favorite shots, end credit shots of any film. Don't ask me what the other 4 are right now. I'm not sure. Anyway, this is an incredible movie. At first, I just thought, I remembered it as being great, but it really kind of emotionally affected me. I was going to do this video the other night, and I was kind of like going through some of my own personal weirdness and evaluating relationships and how people fit together and don't fit together. And just couldn't really do it. I didn't want to like tear up on camera because I just felt so much empathy for this woman and for people who have gone through this, especially women, but men and women. And so, yeah, man, buy these movies. They would do well in any cineast library. They would be a proud, you'd have proud bragging rights to owning them. Okie dokie. So I'm going to wrap up another episode, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe. My thumbs up are starting to go up more, the amount of them. Thank you. I'm, begging on the last few videos. It's paying off a little bit. So by all means, please, please, please give me some more if you're interested in this or like anything about this video. If you like anything about this video and aren't subscribed, please subscribe. Each of those things just takes pressing one little button. So, but I'd greatly appreciate it. I want to kind of get the content seen by more people, and then I can kind of get feedback. Hopefully, at some point, I'm getting some on Facebook, not getting much here, but I would like to keep improving. I know this isn't the best lighting. This is kind of a low tech gig, but some days it looks, medium tech. But that's when I'm downstairs in this Flicker Street studio shooting. So, thank you. I won't drone on any longer, and take care.